Just wanted to share a few brief thoughts with last week's Come Follow Me. So this is in Luke chapter 9, starting in verse 51. We'll just skim through a few here. And it came to pass, when the time was come that he should be received up, he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem, and sent messengers before his face, and they went and entered into a village of the Samaritans to make ready for him. And they did not receive him, because his face was as though he would go to Jerusalem. Now here's the important part right here. And when his disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, Lord, wilt thou that we command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, even as Elias did? But he turned and rebuked them and said, Ye know not what manner of spirit ye are of. For the Son of Man is not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. And they went to another village. Now, I find this very interesting. John and James, the two brothers, are just, they know the stories of the Old Testament. They know the history, and they know of the wrath of God and how he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. He had Joshua destroy all the Canaanites. And this story that they're talking about Elias, this is recorded in 2 Kings chapter 1, where King Ahaziah falls sick, and he commands the soldiers to go arrest Elijah. And the first 50 go, and Elijah calls down fire, destroys them. The next 50 come, and he calls down fire, destroys them. And when the third 50 come, they come on their knees begging him not to kill them, because they're just trying to do their duty, because the king sent them. And God tells Elijah, okay, now you can go down with them, go ahead. And Elijah goes and tells the king that he's going to die. So that's the story they're talking about. Real wrath of God type stuff. And James and John are upset at this town of the Samaritans who, Jesus, he was up near Galilee, and he needed to go to Jerusalem, and he's sent ahead to a village in Samaria, say, hey, make ready, I'm coming through, I'd just like to stay for the night, or maybe a day or two. But the village said, no, you're on your way to Jerusalem. Now this is, of course, the Samaritans and the Jews had a big feud going, and Jews frequently would not even pass through Samaria, they would circle around it to avoid the place. Now we have a Jew who wants to come through Samaria on his way to Jerusalem. And the Samaritan's like, no, come on, you're going to Jerusalem. You go the normal route that all Jews go. You circle around. We don't want you here. It was a common bias of the Samaritans and the Jews. And James and John probably had this same kind of bias. And then, this was pretty ingrained into the culture. And James and John are thinking, hey, remember all these stories? We have the power. He's ordained us apostles. Should we use our power, like the prophets of old did, to smite the wicked? To them, this was logical. This was just how things worked. Because, again, they were thinking of these old stories, and it was not uncommon. Most people in the New Testament, especially during the life of Christ, believed that the Messiah was going to be a military leader who was going to come and smite the wicked nations and liberate Israel. And John and James, they just see this as a perfect opportunity to show this. They're waiting for Christ to liberate the Jews and say, hey, here we go. We can show our power here. This is our opportunity. But what is Christ's response? I have not come to destroy man's lives, but to save them. And I love that. What we got to understand is that the wrath of God, as described in those stories in the Old Testament, is reserved for the truly wicked, people who have gone beyond the point of salvation. When Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, it wasn't because a couple of people were, telling lies now and then. No, these guys were in the depths of degradation. They were the worst of the worst. God could not let them live any longer. When Elijah called down the fire to consume the soldiers, these were apostate Israelites who were following an apostate king and worshiping idols. And when they came to get Elijah, they were not coming in faith, they were coming in their power. And Elijah was saying, no, you guys, you don't have power. Power is God's. And if you're going to come and challenge a prophet of God in your arrogance, when you know better, because these were Israelites, he wasn't calling down fire on Syrians who didn't know God. He was calling down fire on Israelites who knew better. They knew God, they knew the law of Moses, and they were going directly against it. The ones he didn't destroy were the ones who came in faith. The ones who came admitting God's power, saying, look, we know, we understand. The power is yours. We're just doing our duty. The Samaritans were not overly wicked people. They had been in an apostate culture for generations, for hundreds of years. God wasn't just going to destroy them. They needed a chance to learn and repent. And so when John and James, they got it into their head, oh, let's just destroy this town because they're saying, no, they're saying we don't want Jews here. Oh, now it's time to destroy them. They were misreading the stories of the Old Testament. Even the apostles then were misreading this, that God does not destroy out of anger. He destroys out of necessity. There was no need to destroy this village. As I said, they just went to another village. Didn't say they went around Samaria. They still went to, from all indications, it was still a Samaritan village. There was no need to destroy the town of Samaria, this village of Samaria, because they were not wicked. They were just living the culture that they've had. But the other thing we need to know is a lot of people will look at stories like this and they'll say, oh, Christ changed things. After Christ came, we no longer have the wrath of God. Everything's, rainbows and unicorns. It's all love and all this. And to a certain extent, that was true, but only during the life of Christ. When he was on the earth, his calling was not to destroy things. He wasn't coming down to wreak havoc and get revenge and display the wrath of God. He was coming to preach. He was coming to save men. After his death, see, during his life, let's just make this clear. Christ never cursed anybody. He never smote anybody. He healed. He taught. He put people in their place frequently. He was pretty good at smacking down people when they were, but he only did it verbally. And usually he did it by healing somebody else. But after his death, now we start seeing the wrath of God coming back. In Acts we read about Ananias and his wife Sapphira, who tried to hold back some of their donations to the church and lie about it, and they're struck dead. When Christ was going to be thrown off a cliff, he just passed through the crowd. He just kind of sauntered through and was kind of hidden by the Spirit. But when Peter is thrown in prison, an angel comes, rocks the prison, kind of knocks the guards out, and Peter just walks out. But it takes a great miracle, a great power of God, display of the power of God. And of course, it is 70 years later, or in the year 70 AD, that the temple is destroyed, which is another sign of the wrath of God. The people were left to the mercy of the Romans because they killed Christ. But during his life, it is very true that the wrath of God was not poured out. It was held back because Christ was there to save. But once his mission was done, once he had fulfilled the atonement, then the wrath of God could be poured out, because now the people had shown themselves worthy of that wrath. I don't know if this is making any sense. I'm kind of rambling, so I'm going to say goodbye for now.